Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and it's good to be back after about almost a 2 week hiatus for some downtime, a vacation time. Got to go to Arkansas and visit my daughter, son in law, and the grandkids. Actually, got to work on one of my old Mustangs, one of my old vehicles, a little bit. And, in general, I just really had a good time chilling out. Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't in the office. uh, Actually, I was either in the office or I was working on my laptop. Now, I wasn't on the internet. Uh, you know, I was about 99% disconnected from the internet. I could have been on, but I chose not to. But I got on long enough to address a couple of, I won't say critical, but sort of kind of pressing issues, and that's it. I mean, I really distanced myself from the internet. Um, did some good reading, and like I said, it was just a very enjoyable time. I do hope that you had a great holiday season. I turned 75 years old on December the 31st. And by the way, I just have to say this. I want to say thank you so very much for all the wonderful expressions of gratitude for my ministry, uh, appreciation for the messages that I deliver, and best wishes for the holidays and the happy birthday wishes. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those kind of well wishes, and I truly do appreciate it. As I have suggested to you, look, I want this year, I want to be able to reach 10,000 subscribers. Okay? We're at something like, I didn't even look this morning, but I think we're something like 8,500. So we're not that far off. So help me. If you're watching my channel and you're not yet a subscriber on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Doesn't cost a dime, and it actually helps my channel. It helps it to grow even more, obviously. And so I do want to ask, please help us out that way. I mean, if I've got 8,500 subscribers, then that tells you that there are three or four or five times that many people who actually tune in and who just audit. So, how about it? Hit the subscribe button. Okay, want to get back into our study of the feast days of Israel. We have been focused for a good long while now on Sukkot, which is the last, some say semi-last. We'll be talking about Shemini Atzeroth later after we finish our study of Sukkot. But Sukkot was called, and has a variety of different names that might even be called descriptions. It was called the Feast of Harvest, the Feast of Ingathering. It was called the Feast of Our Joy. It was called the Feast of the Joy of the Nations, because on that occasion, sacrifices were offered for all of the known nations of the world. And let me remind you of how significant this is. Israel believed that she had to offer sacrifice on the behalf of the nations so that the nations might be blessed. That without Israel sacrificing for the nations would be destroyed. And without the sacrifices being offered by Israel, that there was no hope whatsoever for any of the nations to have any relationship with Yahweh, to be blessed by Yahweh. So that was why it was called the joy of the nations. Now, very quickly, this leads me to my January 2025 book special. I told you I'd have something really, really good. Okay, I wrote this book, One Root, One Nation, or Kingdom, All Nations. Now, I didn't write this as a direct response to what is known as the Israel-only crazy, ridiculous, godless doctrine, but it impinges on that doctrine. It directly affects that doctrine by pointing out there was one root, that is, the Abrahamic promises. Now, that one root was based upon the Adamic promises, mind you, which were not Israelite promises. The Adamic promises were assimilated into Israelite promises. But what I point out in this book, and as you can see, it's a pretty extensive book, what I point out is that with the Adamic promises being assimilated into the Abrahamic promises, from that point forward, the focus of God bringing about the fulfillment of the Adamic promises was focused on the fulfillment of the Abrahamic promises. Abraham was the one root. This is in Romans chapter 11, which I discuss extensively in this book. And so several people have commented that this book is a devastating blow to what's known as the Israel-only doctrine. Okay, so this is on special this month, along with Into All the World, Then Comes the End. Now, I wrote this book way back when. I've forgotten the exact date on this book, to be honest about it. Let me see here. 1996, yeah, good little while back. This book is an examination of Jesus' promise. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations. Then comes the end. Well, the end of what? Not the end of time, as our dispensational friends claim, and amillennialists often claim. No, the end of the age represented by the Old Covenant temple. Not the end of the Christian age, not the end of the New Covenant, the end of the Old Covenant. So anyway, these two books, all right, I'm not going to go into details because I'm taking up so much time here. But for January 2025, U.S. orders only, you get these two books for $30 postpaid. That is going to save you some really, really serious money. All right. So go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and click on the tab. Now, as of this morning, I'm filming on Sunday morning. There wasn't a banner up yet, but there will be very shortly. All right. So take advantage of this. This is a fantastic offer for the month of January. Now then, back. Sorry about that. Not really, but anyway. Back to the issue. Over the last several weeks, I have shared with you that Matthew chapter 13 is the ultimate, in some ways, New Testament passage that talks about the time of the harvest. I've shared with you some of the linguistics. When Jesus said harvest is at the end of the age, he used that Greek term, very distinctive Greek term, suntelia to aeoniou. And there are different suffixes that are used. I always get it wrong, but that's okay. All right. It's still this consummation of the age, the end of the age. Now, commentators very, very commonly say, oh, that's the consummation of the Christian age. You know, the end of time. That's the way I was raised. That's what I taught for a good part of my ministry. Until I began to realize that's not biblical. I'm not going to go in depth by way of recapitulation of what I've shared with you. But point number one, the Christian age has no end. The New Covenant age has no end. The words of Christ, i.e. the New Covenant, has no end. This is absolutely fatal to futurism. Oh, by the way, it's absolutely fatal to Israel only. But when we come to Matthew chapter 13 and we read the harvest is at the end of the age, we simply are wrong to say it's the end of time or it's the end of the current Christian age. Period. End of story. As they say, mic drop. That doesn't work. And I've demonstrated that Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24, predicted the end and the destruction of the Old Covenant temple as well as Jerusalem. The disciples immediately asked, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Same identical Greek term. Folks, they were not asking. Even Adam Clarke, hundreds of years ago, Adam Clarke, at that time, and in more modern times, N.T. Wright, says the disciples were not asking about the end of the time-space continuum. They were asking about the age that that temple represented. I have posed this question. I hope you will consider it. I hope that you will ponder it well. What age did that temple standing in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, what age did that temple represent? Folks, it did not represent time and space. It did not represent the Christian age. It didn't represent the New Covenant age. How is it possible to engage in such gross eisegesis? That's reading something into the text. How is it possible to read into the text that the apostles were asking about the end of the Christian age when the end of the Christian age is not a biblical doctrine? It's not found anywhere in the Tanakh, that is the Old Testament. Jesus had not predicted any such doctrine or idea. So where would the apostles and why would the apostles have gotten the idea and the thought that in the destruction of Jerusalem, time would end? If you can't prove categorically that the apostles had very strong justification for linking the destruction of Jerusalem with the end of time, then you can't say they were asking about the end of time. Or unless you can prove categorically that the apostles, they knew about the end of time, but Jesus was talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, and the apostles were just confused. Unless you can prove that the apostles were confused, maybe, just maybe, it's not the apostles that were confused, but it's the modern day commentators, or even ancient ones, that claim that the apostles were confused. Point of fact is, the apostles were asking about the identical end of the age that Jesus had predicted in Matthew chapter 13, using that identical Greek term. Now, are we supposed to believe that the apostles knew that Matthew chapter 13 was talking about the end of time? Matthew 24 might have been talking about AD 70, but really they were confused and they thought about the end of time of Matthew 13. We're supposed to believe that? All the while, Jesus used the same term for both, and yet in Matthew 24, the end of the age is directly linked with the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, once again, it will not do simply to claim that the apostles were confused. Listen, I wrote a book on this, Watching for the Parousia, were Jesus' apostles confused or ignorant? And in that book, I have the most extensive review and discussion of that very question. And I prove categorically that the claims of such men like Kenneth Gentry, who wrote 4 articles trying to refute my book, and he failed miserably, I demonstrate there is no reason biblically, textually, exegetically, logically, to assume that the apostles were confused when they asked, what shall be the sign of your coming in the end of the age? They had no reason to believe in the end of the Christian age. Okay. In Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 26. Now once at the end of the age, sutelia to aeonion, or aeoniu, whatever, Christ has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. At the end of what age did Jesus appear? Well, here's something 100% certain. He did not appear at the end of the Christian age. Galatians chapter 4 verse 4 tells us, at the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, made under the law. That's under Torah. That's under the law of Moses. That's under the old covenant age. And Christ appeared in the fullness of time. He appeared at the end of the age. Now, notice, it doesn't say the end of the age had already come. It says he appeared in the end of the age. And that end of the age period, those were the last days. The last days were the days in which Jesus appeared. Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. God, who at sundry times and in divers manners has in time past spoken to us by the fathers, has in these, those were his, last days. They were still living in the last days. They were living in the time of the end of the Mosaic age. So from a linguistic perspective, ladies and gentlemen, harvest would be at the end of the age. But the end of the age was the end of the old covenant age. Because the Christian age has no end. Okay. Tomorrow, I'm going to look at the prophetic background of Matthew chapter 13, which is Daniel chapter 12, which serves as the prophetic source of Jesus' prediction of the harvest at the end of the age. I'll see you on the flip side.